Hi, friends. This is your pal, Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Professor Dungeon Master's dead friend, Gene Christian, 1968 to 2024, and the fate of his second identity, Holga Richtenvoss, the human fighter. All right, let's get into this. Okay. So, Professor Dungeon Master. First of all, let me talk about Professor Dungeon Master for a minute. So, I've done lots of videos about Professor Dungeon Master, and usually they're this model. Professor Dungeon Master is wrong about this right now. The reason why I made so many of those is one, I love to verbally spar, right? And Professor Dungeon Master is a strong verbal opponent, right? And how did he show strength? Well, one, for many of my videos, he just ignored them, right? Like, which that's not a small thing. I've had other verbal sparring partners who just can't handle it, right? Like they're like, "Oh, you swung at me," and I'm like, "We're sparring, like we're verbally sparring here." So one, he would ignore half the stuff, and then on the stuff he didn't ignore, he would just come in and be very gracious and right say, "Oh, like people would say, oh, Scott Garibay is XYZ," and throw in insult here, throw in ad hominem attack there, right? And Professor Dungeon Master would come in and would say, "I like Scott's content." And I'd be like, what? Like most of my videos are me saying you're wrong, right? But he just had a really strong sense of self. And he also is like, Scott's got like 3,000 subs. I got 100K sub button, like, I don't, this is like, a guy who plays in a local, in a local cover band saying that Taylor Smith sucks, right? Like, it's just, he knows who he is. He's got a lot of confidence, right? And so one, that's before I met him. When I met him at the Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo 2 in 2025, and he was just the most delightful person in the world. I just really enjoyed seeing him, and it was phenomenal. It was really, really special. All right, so Professor Dungeon Master, let's get this clear before I go a step further. He's got an incredible channel, a channel much better than mine. Always watch his videos before mine or instead of mine. Like he's got an amazing channel. Like he does this better than me. I'm just gonna say that right out the gate. All right, let's talk about Gene Christian and Holga Richtenvoss and the state of Dungeons and Dragons today, right? And the idea of manifold sentience. Let's get into it. Okay, so the death of Professor Dungeon Master's friend Gene Christian has massive ramifications for the Dungeons and Dragons community. So let's dig into it. So first and foremost, oh, sorry, just a personal note here. I'm 54, okay? And Gene Christian, who's dead now, died. Professor Dungeon Master's friend, dead, right? And you're like, wait a second, Scott, aren't you leaving us stuff out? Actually, I'm going to try to give you everything you need. But the link to the original video about Gene Christian's death and his D&D character, the human fighter, Holga Richtenvoss, you can see that in the link below. So this guy died. He was Professor Dungeon Master's good friend, right? First of all, me and Professor Dungeon Master are a centimeter away from death, right? So one, his friend just died, okay? He was 56. I'm 54. Like, and I'm betting that like our diets are pretty much the same. Our health is probably pretty much the same. I'm very close to death. And like that's my takeaway from this, right? And we don't have to wonder if Professor Dungeon Master is close to death. He's definitely close to death, and the reason why is this year, like last year, he was like, hey, everybody, I got cancer. He did a whole video on it. He did multiple videos where he talked about it, right? So, one, that's benign, but it can pop up at any time, right? So, me and Professor Dungeon Master are just as close to, are just a centimeter past his friend who's in the grave now, right? Like, that's pretty amazing, right? So, just accepting my own mortality. Now, that's not unfair. I've had an incredible life. If I died tomorrow, man, I would die a very, very, very happy man. I'm an evangelical Christian. Jesus Christ has blessed me beyond the stars. Like, I've had a great life. If I died tomorrow, there would be a single thing left undone, in my humble opinion, to have lived an epic life. And this channel is a big part of that, too. I You guys don't know this, but I'm a failed novelist, right? I've written 2 novels. Nobody read them, and nobody cares about them. And that frustrated me until I got a global platform where I was able to say whatever I wanted every single day. And now I'm a nano celebrity. There you go. And that made me happy. I wanted the world to hear what I had to say, and I was been able to do that. And that's a big part of that. And Professor Dungeon Master is a part of that. He's part of this D&D commentator community. Uh, so, I'm very happy. So, just wanted to talk about that. All right, let's talk about Gene Christensen. The ramifications of this are absolutely massive. All right, so first of all, get this. Dungeons and Dragons magnified Gene Christensen's life massively, okay? So first of all, Professor Dungeon Master has a 100K sub button, right? He's got 100,000 followers. Gene Christensen, what do you have, 25, 50 friends? Maybe do 300 people, right? Professor Dungeon Master did a whole video on who, not because he was Gene Christensen, but because of Holger Richtenvoss, right? Holger Richtenvoss, his Dungeons and Dragons character, made him far more famous at the end of his life than anything he did in his life. If it wasn't for Holger Richtenvoss, me and thousands of other people would have never heard about Gene Christensen. He would have died in obscurity. But thanks to Dungeons and Dragons, his legend is carried forward. And I'm talking about him today. I never met him. I didn't care about Gene Christensen, right? Until Professor Dungeon Master said, this dude was epic. He had a great life, and he was my friend, right? So right out of the gate, right? What do I say on this channel? Dungeons and Dragons is not a game. Dungeons and Dragons is a human improvement engine. Am I right? I think Gene Christensen's life proves it, right? It actually is evidence. Let me not say it proves it. It's evidence that what I'm saying is right? Gene Christensen would have died in obscurity without Dungeons and Dragons. But because he had Dungeons and Dragons, literally tens of thousands of people, maybe hundreds of thousands of people, maybe millions of people will know Gene Christensen's life, right? Who he was, who he loved, what he thought mattered, right? Now Gene Christensen is on the map, and Dungeons and Dragons put him there. Nothing he did in his life put him there, right? Other than Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons is epic. It is powerful. It is major. It is not a game, right? Oh, hey everybody. Steve Smith just died. He played Candyland. He's in the ground and nobody cares and nobody knows. Because that's a game and Dungeons and Dragons isn't. Dungeons and Dragons can magnify your living legacy. We don't need to wonder about it. It just happened, right? So one of the things I just want to point out is Gene Christensen would have died in obscurity without Dungeons and Dragons, but he didn't, right? I'm sitting in the suburbs of Philadelphia, singing his praises. Gene Christensen was a great guy, right? We all should honor him. Let's have a moment of silence for Gene Christensen. There you go, right? One, Dungeons and Dragons is not a normal thing. It is not a game. It is far more than that, right? Now, what is interesting is, and this is kind of the point, right? Is football a game? Go talk to the guy, is baseball a game? Go talk to the guy who got a $700 million check. Talk to the 50 charities he's linked to and ask him, is that a game? They're like, no, this is literally our livelihood. This is how we're going to erect a house where troubled women live. It's way more than a game, right? And Dungeons and Dragons is moving into the space where it's not just me anymore saying this is more than a game. This is a platform, a powerful platform, right? So I wanted to talk about that. Gene Christensen did not die in some obscurity because of Dungeons and Dragons. And absolutely nothing he did in his life mattered more than his Dungeons and Dragons. Because I guarantee you, there's no other communities with hundreds of thousands of people celebrating his name today, right? That's a big deal. That's a really, really big deal. All right, next point. Okay. So Gene Christensen, all right, he created this character, this human fighter, Holger von Richtenvoss, okay? Now, first of all, this gets really weird. Holga sounds like a female name, and Holga was literally a female name in Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. Was Holger Richtenvoss a male or female character? That's a weird question. I don't know. I don't. It's fine if he was running a female character, but that was kind of odd. So I thought that was a little odd, right? But let's assume Holger Richenvoss was a male character, a male player character. Now, first of all, Professor Dungeon Master explained that he was a bounty hunter. He also explained that this was a Dungeons and Dragons character, right? So first of all, I don't know what so bounty hunter, I don't know what version they were playing, right? But today you would just he's a human fighter and he has a bounty hunter. He has a bounty hunter subclass, right? So I'm just saying human fighter because I think that's the better understanding, right? The reason why is I know Professor Dungeon Master, one thing I love about Professor Dungeon Master is he does not hate new things. He's an old man, but he doesn't hate new things. That is extremely rare today. No, I'm an old man and I hate everything new. Boy, is that tired, played out. That's why I don't listen to those guys, right? So that's one of the reasons why I listen. So he might be playing some old school version, right? And that's why he used the bounty hunter. So I did want to just let you know, Holger Richenvoss technically is a bounty hunter. I'm going to say human fighter because I think that's correct. And allows people who play Dungeons and Dragons today to understand what's happening. All right. Okay. So human fighter Holger Richenvoss. Okay. So first of all, Gene Christensen dies, right? But they're still in a campaign. So first of all, the Professor Dungeon Master is like, well, what do I do, right? And he explains what he did in the video. They actually fast and furiated, right? Literally, they used this exact same process that they used in Fast and Furious when Paul Walker died, right? So Paul Walker was playing a character in Fast and Furious. He died, and they brought his brother in to play him one last time and show his player character, even though the player was dead, right? They literally did a Fast and Furious ending for, now we'll get there. It's not an ending. That's the whole point. So they did one more session. They did a session, not even one more, okay? They did a session with Holger Richenvoss with his brother. And there was a possibility that Holger Richenvoss would die at the table, right? Because it was a very dangerous ending, right? But he didn't. He lived, and Holger Richenvoss then went to his farm to live with his family, right? And Professor Dungeon Master said, okay, that's the ending of Holger Richenvoss's story. Here's where it gets interesting. Is it? Is it? Here's my question. Who owns Holger Richenvoss today, right? So first of all, the actual owner of Holger Richenvoss was Gene Christian, okay? He's dead. Did he put him in his will? No. How do I know that? Because I can guarantee you Professor Dungeon Master would have mentioned that, right? Because he would have said, oh, because he talked about it. He's like, and he would have said, hey, this was so important that he put it in his will, and he willed that character to his wife. He didn't, right? So that character doesn't actually have a real owner today because it wasn't established by legal U.S. law, to my knowledge, with a will, right? Now, if there was a will here, and so one, listen up. If you actually can establish legal ownership of your player character if you put it in your will. And so one of the things that I think should be thought about right now is we need to start listing, we need to secure our physical paper character sheets, and we need to will them to people so that the ownership is clear, right? Now, what happens when a player character is not owned, okay? So first of all, and then also, is the player character even bound to the physical piece of paper? This gets extremely interesting, right? And so this is what's really interesting. So I actually think that the person, actually, who owns Holger Richenvoss today? You and me. Why? Because Professor Dungeon Master gave Holger Richenvoss to you and me. Human fighter Holger Richenvoss. He gave it to us when he brought that story to the D&D community. Now, any of us can pick up Holger Richenvoss as a player character and play that player character, or I think inappropriately a Dungeon Master could use him as a non-player character. I think since Holger Richenvoss was a player character, the correct fate of Holger Richenvoss should be that they are used as a player character and not as non-player characters. But I think this is really fascinating, and I think the true owner of Holger Richtenvoss today is the D&D community, and anybody in the D&D community can elect to use Holger Richtenvoss as a player character today and carry them forward. And you would have to carry them forward from their farm where they leave their family and go back out adventuring. Every single word you just heard in this video was my humble opinion. Nothing more, nothing less. The important part is when I get to hear your humble opinion. When you get in the comments and send your traffic, please consider like subscribing and have a fetch millennium.